Welcome to the Pickleball Talks, a podcast of the Interact Pickleball Network. My name is Mark Sarazin, your host, and today I am excited to have Dr. Frank W.J. Anderson, MD. Hello, Frank. Welcome.
Hey, Marco. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
I couldn't be more excited to have you, Frank. You know, we've known each other now for some time, and I've learned a lot from you. I've learned about awareness and about being aware of being aware. And at first I had no idea what that meant. And, you know, I'm still trying to understand it, but I employ it and it's working. That's all I know because I've grown a lot from it. So you're a physician. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and, you know, where you started your career and where you are now?
Sure. Well, I'm a physician. I'm a board certified obstetrician gynecologist, and I've worked at various academic universities. I was at the University of Michigan for about 22 years. I'm a professor emeritus now and living in Miami. But during the whole time I was doing medicine, public health and global health research and things like this, I was also very interested in mindfulness and to see how mindfulness would work in medicine, how it would work with patients and with your colleagues. And I eventually did a mindful meditation teacher certification program. So with Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, who are both very prominent mindfulness teachers, and did the certification there. Had been doing retreats and classes and all types of things, teaching mindfulness techniques. But, you know, as things evolved, I got more interested in what is the mechanism of action of mindfulness, what's behind it all, what is it to be mindful. That's when I wrote that book, the book here, Guide to the Mindful Awareness Perspective. That and my Exploring Awareness podcast all brought all these things together for me.
I remember first reading it when you were putting it together and asking me my opinion about it. And, you know, I was still neophytic in my journey and still am. I'm constantly trying to grow and get better and other things, understand things from different perspectives. And at first I said, what is this? You're being aware at this level, and then there's another awareness level, and then there's another awareness level, and I was confused. But as I started to really think about it, if I was driving my car, or if I was on the boat, or if I was, you know, behind the computer working, I started to employ some of those things that would just come into my conscious mind, I guess had been roaming around in my subconscious mind, and integrating into my everyday and catching myself. And going, I'm more aware of that. And I said, well, how can that apply to pickleball? If I'm applying and I'm creating this podcast about all these different philosophies of how we should act and sportsmanship and how it represents life metaphors, how does it represent itself as you approach the service line and you start the match? How should you be aware? What should you be aware of? So you're a physician and a mindfulness teacher. What brought you to the pickleball court?
You brought me to the pickleball court, actually. We just got finished playing pickleball today for the first time I've ever been to play pickleball. But you and I have discussed this before, but I did want to go back for a second. And, you know, I have a podcast too called the Exploring Awareness Podcast. And my co-host there, Lisa Berry, and you had a lot of similarities in trying to figure out what this all means. And figuring out is one habitual way to do it. And also to just experience it is another way to do it. And so, you know, no matter what you're doing, whether you're sitting down having a short meditation or whether you're walking or playing pickleball, you know, it's all being present. And so really what attracts me to this whole pickleball thing is that it seems like the origins of pickleball and the kind of vibe around pickleball in its best form is like a presence practice.
I would never have thought about doing a podcast. I pretty much didn't listen to too many podcasts. It was all about Premier League soccer. That's what I listened to repeatedly, just different forms of the same thing. And then Frank and I became friends through sailing. As we progressed in our friendships, he said, Mark, I have a podcast. And I said, that's amazing. And I started listening to it. He has 70 different episodes. And, you know, as I started to listen to the podcast, I started to really look at, first of all, he had an amazing interaction with his partner in the podcast. And it was one of inquisitiveness that I listened, and I actually could feel their journey together as they moved in order to create, that wonderment, that new type of friendship of people who just met and said, hey, let's do a podcast together. But, people always say, hey, let's get to dinner. And from, hearing the story and reading the book, they actually did it. And what came from it actually helped change my life. And this is why I have Dr. Anderson here on the show today, because in my journey of trying to reset and in my evolution and what this podcast is about and bringing all the different types of alternative healers, traditional doctors, all the things that we discussed prior, is that this certainly was something that really helped things integrate. And then we started to play together. And we had a couple of moments that were absolutely amazing with some of the people we met in just a short amount of time. Well, we were just about an hour and 15 minutes. And look at how many different interactions we had with complete strangers.
Yeah, that was great.
It was amazing, right?
A family playing there with their kid. He'd only been playing for 6 weeks, and he had progressed pretty well from what I could tell. And for me, to finally find my legs and find my coordination, I got complimented at the end of the day.
He certainly did. And, what I've learned in general, but even more so lately, if through Frank's teachings and listening and learning from him, is that, words matter, right? And today I heard a word from somebody who I consider to be a mentor and who said, I never really considered myself to be coordinated. And I said, well, if you want to anchor yourself that way and frame yourself in that manner, that's not okay, because that's not what I believe. And we had some beautiful dinks. We had some great rallies. Frank hit a shot, and we ended on that because it went straight down the line, right inside by 6 inches. And we did our, paddle to paddle high five. And you know what? I introduced somebody new to the sport. They had an amazing time. I watched my friend really enjoy themselves, and that brought me joy. And that's what this is about. And, that's the awareness of awareness that I'm trying to learn. So, Frank, could you expand on that and explain it just a little bit more for everyone else?
Oh, sure. So the book and the concept here, this mindful awareness perspective, is like a pivot. It's like an intention to just not be in your head, but be out, aware of your thoughts. But it's not that easy to do, as we've already talked about. And in the book, you'll see a metaphor, and the metaphor starts in a place called Hacklandia. And hacks stand for habits, assumptions, conditioning, and fixed knowledge. And so, of course, we as humans walk around with our habits and our conditionings and what happened to us as children and what our expectations are and what we want and what we don't want. And it's a lot of that's unconscious. So this path here from Hacklandia to a mindful awareness perspective, I call it the 4+2 path. And the first stop on the 4+2 path is to be aware of your breath, because all the thoughts and emotions and all of these things are swirling around, but the breath is always there. The breath is always there. It's always just present, and it's keeping you alive. So if you stop first to be aware of your breath, then already you're aware. You're not just unconsciously breathing. You're actually aware of your breathing. You can do the same that with your body. Your body is here. It's present. It's not doing this or that or the other thing. It's just present. So being aware of your breath and your body kind of grounds you in the present moment. Now, if you can have awareness of those two things, you can also have awareness of your thoughts and your emotions. So if you know that you're breathing, you're aware of your breathing. And if you know that you're thinking, you're aware of your thinking. Now, what knows that that's your core. That's the source of peace and joy and love and compassion. From that place that isn't affected by anything else. That's identity as awareness, right? So if you present on the court in that way, your whole game is going to be very different than if you present on the court with habits and expectations and assumptions and things like this that get in the way of you being free.
In life, we go through, especially as men, and we don't want to give tribute to people who've helped guide us in life. And everything that you said holds true, because I had the honor of being able to read the book before it was published. And as I was going through that particular time of my life, I read about breath, and I knew about breath, and I've seen breath work, and I've seen it on TV and a little bit here in yoga class. But I said, whoa, what if I took it to the next level? So I searched out going to breathwork class. And I have to say, Frank, that truly was something that took me from one point in my life to another point in my life, is truly understanding my breath, understanding the fact that it creates a change in dopamine. It creates a change in alpha, theta, and beta waves. It just creates a change. And when you're doing it, you go and you look deeper into yourself, and you look at the stuff you don't want to look at. And it's that subconscious stuff that we've pushed down that starts to rise and rise and rise as you do the breath work, and to present yourself with the truth. And boy, sometimes you don't want to look at it, but when you start to look at it, that's when you grow. That's when you grow, when you truly face the real stuff. And that's part of the awareness that I started to realize. And then I started to read the book again. And I'm like, okay, now I'm peeling the onion. Now I'm going down deeper, and I'm becoming more aware. And then I'm starting to look out, and I go, whoa, I'm seeing things through a different set of eyes. And through the breath work and through the consciousness of being aware, and then realizing that there is only infinity. And I tell people when we talk, there's no mountaintop. It's the same thing with this. You got to keep doing the work, and being aware of the fact sometimes that you don't know anything, and you can achieve that. That's stripping ego. These are all some of the things that I took for me personally that I needed. And everybody can take something away from this, whatever they need, of that spice rack that I talk about in this book.
Well, and there's all kinds of ways to talk about it and explain it. And that's how we as humans have to communicate. But ultimately, this is really about transforming everything into present moment awareness, because the past is gone and the future is yet to come. The present moment is where it's all happening, right? And so when you're aware, you're in the present. The mindful awareness perspective transforms everything into present. So even when you're trying to figure out what's happening, that's also part of your mind. So as long as you're present to all of those things, or aware of all those things, it puts you in the present. And that's your natural state. And you're not gaining anything from this. You're just returning to who you were in the first place. And so the fact that, you have more dopamine means that's your natural state. What you were before was not.
Right. So that's exactly what I talk about. All right. And we're looking at pickleball, and let's go back to 65, because that's what we're talking about. And that's where the sport has kind of gone from being a game, got sportified, and is now a sport. Right. That's why we have some of the things that we do going on. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about 1965. And you talk about awareness, right? And I'm looking at, it started about family. It started about community. It started about sportsmanship, right? That was the awareness back then. But somehow in the sport, as I travel, I ask people, hey, why does the sport have a unique rule that starts at 002? And I've asked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, perhaps over 1,000 at this point. And only a couple of people, not even 6 people have been able to answer that question. That says to me, wow, there's no awareness of what you're playing, what you're doing. And it's so important to know the history. And that's about being aware. And being aware is when you step to that line, that you have an opportunity to reset everything else. But going back to 1965, right? The awareness. And that's what we're spreading in the podcast. And that's what it's ultimately about. Now, let's talk about the awareness of what happened then, right? In someone's backyard in Bainbridge Island. Just 3 guys improvising with the equipment that they had. What does the origin of that story say to you?
It says to me, People talk about the benefits of mindfulness. I don't like to use the word benefits because you're not really gaining anything. You're just being your true self. And your true self is about the joy of being, about the unity of all beings, about interconnectedness, about peace and joy, love. And so these are all natural things. You may not even be aware of it. You're just expressing it as part of your natural essences, right? So these folks, these dads, I think they wanted to give their kids something to do. So they created this game that didn't require you to be super athletic, that didn't require you to have these expectations. It sounds like the game was more for fun than it was to win, right? It sounds like it was more for community building, to get together, to have something to do. People are aware of their bodies. They just don't know they're aware. They're aware at a certain level, and even awareness of these rules. But the awareness of awareness, when you can kind of tap into that, it just enhances the situation because you're being there as your complete self. So it seemed to me like this wasn't an expression of who's the best athlete. This was an expression of kind of the essence of kind of joy and connection. How can we do this together? Because I think the kids were bored. They were living somewhere far away, and they made this court. But it caught on because, it's hard to walk onto a tennis court and start playing if you don't know how to play tennis, or walk onto a football field, or, whatever. It's a lot of those sports are set up in ways. We go to high school and we become very competitive, and you kind of advance. There aren't many sports you could just pop into, maybe bowling. But,
well, that's one of them. I mean, I would say the closest thing that you'd have is you go to the YMCA and there's a pickup basketball game, and you wait on the side there and you jump in. But it's nowhere near, what we're talking about with pickleball.
Well, there's
it's
like
different.
the fastest growing sport.
Right.
And
Yes.
so now you've got all these people who want to play, and I know they have retirement communities, and people of all physical abilities could do this. And then you got these hyper competitive people as well, which is fine. People want to do that, but you've kind of got a mix between the two as well. So it seems like that starts to create some Hacklandia stuff that people are expectations aren't being met, or they want to win, and this is kind of more of a community sport. So I don't know. Have you noticed that?
That's what I started this show because of that, quite honestly. And what makes it refreshing is having you on, because literally you learned about pickleball, watching a couple of YouTube clips over the last couple of days, or whatever your sources were. And then you and I getting on the court just down the street here from the podcast studio and showing you some things. And then we wind up having a blast, having fun, and learning something new, which you should be doing every single day anyway. But, getting prepared to hear it from just a pure perspective, because you haven't been out there, you haven't seen it. So it's a wholesome overview with, of course, the whole point that I was trying to make earlier is that awareness, people aren't even aware of, the rules. When you step to that line and you go to the right side for the first time serve, it starts 0-0-2. Why? People don't even know. 99% of people I've asked don't know. That's a huge percentage of people. And that's part of the reason why we're having trouble with the aggressiveness, the coming to the not knowing the history and the original energy that this was created from.
Well, here's my take on it, because even myself playing this game for the first time, I mean, everyone has habitual ways of thinking and habitual ways of reacting and assumptions that they have, So I get on there and I am trying to, watch these things come and go, right? Because I'm like, what does your mind usually say when you miss a shot? Or what does your mind usually say when you hit the ball off to the side? Or what does the other person expect from you? I don't know how to play with you, but if you play with someone else who's expecting you to be better than you are, or something like this, all of these are these emotions that come up. So I'm not so worried about awareness of the rules. That's knowledge. But if you can see yourself doing that, right, and see how it's actually not true, or it's interfering with you being in the present moment, right? The present moment is where you're playing pickleball, not in the past from all the habits and conditioning that you had, and not in the future for worrying whether you're going to look good or look bad or win or lose, right? It's just part of being present. That's where the joy of being exists.
I agree 100%. What I'm trying to explain is this, is that those people in the present moment don't know of or understand or respect the fact that you're standing on a court. And the reason why this court exists, it comes from an energy of love, right? And that energy of love, when it came from the game and got sportified to the sport, got lost. You got to know your history. You know your history of your own family, where they came from, the ancestry of it, right? But people don't know the history of the sport that they're playing. If they did, my point is that the awareness of that moment, of knowing the history of the game, the beauty of it, right? The magical energy that it came from, then they would behave better. They would appreciate the factor on the court of the intention of where it came from. So that is kind of the point of what I'm trying to talk about in the reset of what I've done. When people have the awareness, right? When they scan their QR code, when they see the word reset, not the one that's actually on the court, but before you go to the court, is how am I going to behave today? That's awareness, right? Today I'm going to think that when I put that paddle in that slot over there and I meet that stranger, I want them to feel better than when they left. That stranger could become my friend. Today, we made very strong acquaintances in a very short amount of time. It was beautiful, right? That's what it is. It's the awareness of the fact that if you're not sure of a point being in or out, guess what? Just call reset, replay the point. That's what it's about. It's about fun, joy, and the awareness of that. And sure, I'm not saying don't be competitive. I'm one of the most competitive people that you'll meet. And no, it's just how I handle myself on the court in honoring the fact that I get to be on the court, enjoy that moment, and have the fun and joy of the sport that it was intended to be.
I think there's two ways to look at that. There's a top-down approach and there's a bottom-up approach. And you probably heard that. Lisa and I talk about that on the podcast. So a top-down approach says you should do this and you should do this and you should do this and you should do this. You shoulds, a lot of shoulds. And of course there's rules and there's history and things like that. But a bottom-up approach means that it's natural to do that. It's natural to welcome people to the court. It's natural to experience the joy. It's natural to feel the connection with other people and play a game for fun, and how you manage those balls out and those other things. If you go to the court and you set an intention, to be present, then I think a lot of this stuff arises naturally because you're no longer being run by habits and conditioning. You're being motivated by your essences.
I stopped playing for a while, and I've mentioned that before on this podcast, because I was coming to the courts and waking up very early, going there, not to just get exercise, but to get rid of the prior stresses of the days from the prior week, or all the work that I had to do for my job, whatever it be, just life circumstances, right? And just release. But I was leaving the court feeling worse than I came. And that's what the problem was, because other people were bringing their stuff, and which was them not being honest with themselves, being aggressive, using words that weren't appropriate in front of kids. The list goes on. And that's a small part of the negativity that we see, right? And when I talk about this is because what we're seeing here in the news these days, Frank, is that it's led to an aggressiveness and to actual violence, and to where we've had quite recently, a felony assault and some other things that I've seen personally in my travels. So there's not awareness. There's disrespect. There's unsportsmanlike conduct. So this is what I'm trying to convey, is that how you step to that court, on the court, and how you step to the line to serve is a reset every single time. And that you should be more concerned about what's going on in the interaction and then winning the point. But no, that's the win. But I'm saying don't be competitive. Win. Play to win, 100%.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, then there's two ways to look at it. You see what other people do, but you're responsible for your own reactions to that as well. And so when you encounter those type of things, what do you do? You know, how do you move on from that? Because it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the other person. But of course, there's a great Buddhist saying that I love. It's called the winner sows hatred because the loser suffers. Let go of winning and losing and find joy. So it's kind of like you're there without attachment to anything. So if someone's is acting up on the court, you know, if it affects you, then that's something to be aware of. Why is it affecting me? Is it like re-triggering some things? You know, am I going at the wrong times? You know, what is that about your reaction to other people that you can also work on?
That's exactly the discussion I had last night with somebody. And it's amazing to hear that from that perspective. And, you know, that it's I guess a Buddhist philosophy or understanding that, yeah, I've let go of the outcome, but I still like to win. But if I lose, it's okay. Like, who cares? You know, I don't need to win 11 matches in a row.
But you're really there to have fun.
Yes.
And that's what most people are there to have fun. And the people that, you know, want to be competitive should do that. But, you know, probably the mix is where the expectations and assumptions, you know, aren't in congruence.
So you talk about MAP in the 4x2. How do you see that transcending to the court after today of what you? I mean, it was a brief, you know, overview of the sport.
Yeah. I think you know. First of all, whatever people do, whatever you do, being present is kind of like meditation. But you know, sometimes it's hard to like just jump right into it in the middle of it. So I think doing some things before the game can help you get grounded into the present moment, right? And now you could do it at home for a few minutes, you know, 10 or 15 minutes of just practicing what I call exploring awareness. I don't like to use the word meditation because that's got a lot of other connotations. In the book, it tells you those 4 steps, you know, to just sit for a minute, to be aware of your breath and your body and your thoughts and emotions and being aware of those. But when you're on a pickleball court, I think you could do the same thing, but you would have, first of all, you have to have an intention to do that, right? You can't, there is that, you do have to have an intention, and then you have to kind of pivot. And I would say you kind of step into that court and you pivot into the present moment, you know, and take a breath and feel your body and feel the paddle in your hand. And you also see the people around you and realize the interconnection of all beings, you know, and that kind of acceptance and inclusion and participation, you know, that comes from a natural state. All the judgments and the, you know, expectations, that is all just part of the conditioning. So if you intentionally do that when you get on the court, I think that, and it doesn't have to take very long either, if you have an intention to do it and just ground yourself. And I noticed I was doing that too, because, you know, you get a little flustered when the ball's going all over, but, you know, you reset, like you say, you reset by just not just being aware of the breath and the body, but knowing that you're doing it. You know, It's different. Knowing that you know puts you in a place, just a different place, a place that's really more authentic, not made up by all the things you think.
There's a lot of competition in pickleball right now. We got ratings, we've got tournaments, we've got pressure. How does the mindful awareness apply when the stakes are high?
Yeah, so now we're talking about professional people playing pickleball against
absolutely,
each other.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that I think people, when people talk about being in the zone, I think that's being very, very present. Now, when they say they're in the zone, they are aware that they're in the zone, but they don't know that they're aware, right? So there is that possibility to ground that zoning, in the awareness of the awareness. So then as you're playing and competitive playing, if you're knocking yourself around because of every mistake, you're going to be knocked off your game. So I think that practicing the presence through the mindful awareness perspective, being perfectly present, not judging what happens, but keep going. I think that's what professionals do already, and I think that's something that we can learn from them, and we can define it with these words. The zone is not as easy to kind of know what that means as being mindfully aware of the present moment. But I think that's exactly what it is. So, when you see emotional reactivity happening in you as you play, transform that into presence, then you're back in the present and you're not being distracted by all the things in your head that are pulling you out of it.
Pickleball is famous for its social culture, the community aspect. How does that connect to your work?
Yeah, that's a great question because, you can talk about being aware of your breath, aware of your body, aware of your thoughts, and aware of your emotions. That's all good for you grounding yourself and becoming aware. But what else does that do? Now we've talked about how it might reveal some of the essences, but it also, that level of awareness that we all have access to, is the same for all of us, right? So that's where you get the interconnection of all beings, because at that level of awareness, there's no difference between us. And so if you can experience that through these practices, then you'll understand how our similarities are tremendously greater than our differences.
That's part of what, I don't want to say my teachings or my philosophy or however I put that into whatever,
these are
group.
Realizations.
Realizations.
They're
Great. Thank
thoughts.
you. No.
You can't think this up. You can't make it happen. You just experience the unity of all beings. Mm-hmm. The interconnection of all beings is not a question. It is the way it is. Once habits, conditioning, assumptions drop off.
As we look at our bifurcated society, right, we've seen that there's the disconnect, whether it be from social media or whether it be from all the other factors that are out there, right?
Hacks. I would call all of those hacks.
Okay. So hacks, we'll get into that in a second here, but there's somewhere, somehow, any person that you meet on there, that person on the side of you who's your new partner across the net, there's something in common. There's a common denominator, right? That's what we're trying to find. Right. And that's what this sport helps us get back to, the fact that we could have an opportunity here, the best opportunity, right, in present time right now for us to come together, right? And that talked to me about the hack.
A hack. So hacks, as we said, stands for habits,
yes,
assumptions, conditioning, and fixed knowledge, right? And so if you've been doing something, the same thing over and over and over again, or if you already know everything already, you're already conditioned to be a certain way and to do a certain thing, or you have all of these assumptions. And some might be true and some might be helpful. I'm not saying hacks are bad, but hacks is just the way we're made, how we present our personalities, our biology. I mean, it's all biological, social kind of constructions, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're able to see that, you pick which ones work for you and which ones don't work for you.
Okay. Right? So you talk about breath. So they call that a rising sign. When you first come in here and supposedly, it helps establish your personality, right? And then whether that's under your one sign and the sign that's a moment in time that I always talk about. So what is that? As it applies to the hack, we're talking about what's in us, our personality traits, right? So you're hacking your own traits, or you're hacking the other person's trait?
Oh, no.
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I'm an obstetrician, as you know.
Right.
And I've witnessed thousands of births. And when a baby comes out, it has the genes from its parents, and it has all of its physical characteristics that are in there that will develop as you go along. But the baby is also just a pure being. It doesn't know dark and light. It doesn't know cold, hot. It doesn't know anything. It learns all of these things as it grows up, right? And I'm not saying hack is a bad thing, but you need to be hacked so that you don't, put your finger on the stove, or you have to learn how to be in the world, right? We all learn there's certain things. You learn from your parents, you learn from your friends, but that's also things that you've learned. But there's other knowledge that's deeper inside of you about the love and the joy and the peace and the compassion that I see in babies all the time, especially the joy of being. They're just so happy and they're so cute. So that part of you never goes away. It just gets covered up by all the things that you learn, judgments and habits and all of these things. Some serve you, some don't. So hacks aren't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just how we end up. I mean, if you're hacked to curse every time you miss a shot, you're just doing it as out of a habit, out of a reaction. If you saw the emotion rising up, you can transform that to present. It's not going to be there could be no reason to curse. I'm not saying don't curse, but you know what? Cursing will drop off the more you do this kind of work.
Right. I just want people to be aware of their environment. And when they do curse, for it to be where there's not children, because that's affecting, the way that we represent ourselves. That's what I mean by that. So you wrote a book called A Guide from Mindful Awareness Perspective. How does mindful awareness work? And what is one thing that you want a pickleball player to take away from it?
So if you take a look at that book, all of this will be explained in much more detail. And it also gives you some practices that you can do at home, and not just on the pickleball court, but at home, in the car, with your kids, with your family, or just by yourself while you're drinking coffee in the morning. So it kind of, when you do that at home, it kind of lets you become more and more familiar with what this mindful awareness perspective is about. It doesn't just happen like that. It takes some time to and as you said, and that's like Lisa, my podcast co-host, and many of the people that I've taught, doctors and medical students as well. It's something that emerges as you practice this more. So the mindful awareness perspective, which everyone has already, it's just covered up. The more you become familiar with it, the more you'll want to support it.
Okay, fair enough. So what's Maptopia, and can pickleball get you there? I tried to ask about that here, right? And you can see in a bigger perspective, but yeah, what is Maptopia? Tell me about that.
There is a map. So clever, right?
Yeah.
The Exploring Awareness podcast has a map. MAP stands for Mindful Awareness Perspective, right? So there's a map to the map. And so let me say that this is not to achieve anything or to get anywhere. I know there's some mountains in there. Sometimes it's difficult. But Maptopia is a return to your true nature of unconditional love, the joy that has no opposite, the peace that's not figured out, and compassion for yourself and others. And with that, knowing that all beings have that, the unity of all beings. So that Maptopia is the place where you acquire this innate knowledge, and then you bring that material back to Hacklandia. So we all live in Hacklandia, but how do you want to move around in the world? Do you want to move around the world based on all the habits and judgments and everything that you've learned? Or do you want to move around the world with a sense of peace and joy and love and compassion? Right? And so that's, to me, this whole origin of the pickleball story. That's how you want to move around, how you want to play, how you want to interact with other people. Right? So it's this bottom-up approach, not saying you have to do that, but if you get in touch with that inner dimension, you're going to want to do it that way. And you're going to be fun to be around. People are going to want to play with you. And then if everyone did that, we'd all have to be fun. But, one at a time.
Absolutely. So you founded the Mindful Awareness Institute. What are you building there, and how might pickleball community fit in?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the Mindful Awareness Institute was formed to teach the mindful awareness perspective. Now, there's a lot of ways to learn mindfulness and to learn to meditate, and all of those methods offer different people a different path into this, right? So there's just a million different ways you could have a mindful awareness perspective, and I've done a lot of those different techniques and different classes and different things like that. And so over the years, as I have been experiencing all of these different techniques and methodologies and things like that, and after the Exploring Awareness podcast too, and all that I learned from that, to kind of distill out what is kind of a accessible, low barrier way to realize the mindful awareness perspective. And so in the book, in the map, to me, that is a very core of what this is all about. So, you can add, I made a Buddhist quote. Buddhism has a lot of this. Christianity has a lot of this. Other religions have a lot of this. Other classes have a lot of this. Your breath work, all of these things. But you even said, this is kind of the root. This is, to me, at least in my opinion, the very core of what that's all about. That's why I call it how mindfulness works. And I work with a lot of doctors and medical students, people who are too busy to sit down and meditate and things like that. So this approach is kind of what's behind it all, the mechanism of action, so to speak. So the Mindful Awareness Institute is there to teach that mindful awareness perspective method in this very low barrier, easy access way to understand it. And so, it will have classes for doctors, it will have classes for medical students, it will have classes for the general public. And, if there's a pickleball person who wants to learn to be a mindful awareness perspective teacher for pickleball, I think that would fit in perfectly.
I couldn't agree more. This is the last question before I'm going to ask you a little bit about yourself. So what's the one thing you want someone to do differently than the next time that they step onto a pickleball court?
To do differently? Well, I don't know what they do necessarily.
I know. It's a trick question, but you wrote it. So can you answer, Dr. Frank?
Well, I wouldn't say do differently because that is not, I don't know what you do. But I would say that when you step onto a pickleball court and you're excited and nervous or whatever, that you do one thing, that you set your intention to be present and take a breath, feel your body to support that. And then as you're playing, remember that the present moment is the only moment. The past is gone and the future is yet to come. And in the present moment, you'll find the joy of being.
Dr. Frank Anderson, I want to personally thank you for teaching me that, because every time I step to that line, I employ that. And I learned that, and I learned that from you. So I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And that changed the way that I look at things. That part of the reason why I did that podcast. And like I said, in life, we sometimes don't give tribute to the people who help us in life. So once again, thank you, Dr. Frank.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to learn a little bit about you, since I know a little bit about you. From being a doctor when you're not being a doctor, okay? Could you tell me about some of the hobbies that you like just in general, some of the things you like to do?
I've been living in Miami for 5 years, and one of the things I really love is sailing. And my wife and I have learned to sail, and that's how we met as well.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the reasons I like it so much, once you get through the technical stuff and all the getting off the mooring ball and motoring through the narrow channels of the boat, but once you actually get out there and you open the sails and the wind catches your sails and the engine gets turned off, it's just like, you just go through the wind. I love that. That is like a way to be super present, and that's where it puts me in a very wonderful sense of connection, to everything. So I love sailing. I also have, grown to love certain types of electronic music because I have noticed that too puts me in a very present moment. Music that doesn't have words necessarily, but just that beat. And I know I've introduced you to my favorite DJ, Roderick, and you like that too.
I certainly do.
And so I've been exposed to that in different ways, and I really enjoy that a lot myself as well. I've also had the chance recently to go work as a doctor up on the Navajo Indian Reservation. And, this is up in northern Arizona, at 5,000 feet, and amongst the red rock and the canyons and the landscapes and the open skies. It's absolutely amazing. And I love to go hiking and mountain biking. A friend of mine has a dirt bike, took me out on a dirt bike there too. And just to be out there in nature, it certainly is a great way to be present without having, you don't have to sit and meditate to be present. You can be present in any setting. So I think, a lot of the things that I do put me in the present moment. And that's where you experience the joy of being and love and compassion and peace.
I can agree anymore. And that's, what I've talked about and finding those common denominators. And the common denominators is that Frank and I love the ocean. That's one of them. We love music. We love extremely similar types of music. We like all music, but so there's some very specific types of music that we like, and just the general fact that we enjoy life. And I think that's the most important thing, and that's what we're talking about. Pickleball is where you can reset and enjoy life again. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Anderson, for your time, and really appreciate our discussion today. And are there any more workshops that are coming? Do you have another book coming out, or is it just this book? Do you have your own podcast that you're thinking about doing? Tell me about some of your future endeavors.
Yeah, you're right. Well, there's 63 episodes of the Exploring Awareness podcast in season 1. So I'm working on season 2 that will be kind of a synopsis of the book. I'm also on Substack at Dr. Frank W. Joe. It's where I write about these things as well. And I am working on another book. This book is a guide to the mindful awareness perspective, but I'm also working on a book that really contains all the material from which the guide comes from. I meditate every morning and I write every morning, and I have a lot of material that I'm putting together that will be like the prequel to this book. So that's all in process right now.
Amazing. And you've told me that you have a practice that you're setting up in Miami?
That's right. Yeah, I have a private gynecology practice starting up in May.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And this has been a podcast of the Interact Pickleball Network. My name is Mark Sarazin. Look for us on all the major podcasting networks. Thank you and have an amazing day.